So excited to be here. Everyone, welcome Sam Stockdale, Managing Director of Power and Infrastructure at Link Logistics. Sam, great to have you here with us.
Thanks for having me.
So I think a good place to start, we've talked a lot about, obviously, the soaring energy demands. This has a huge impact on the real estate industry, but I think it's something maybe we don't talk about enough. And we've been hitting some of those areas, which I'm so excited about at the conference today. So can you give us a little bit of background on Link Logistics in your role as maybe a scene setter to get us going?
And I always I tell people that Link Logistics is the largest company you've never heard of. We're Blackstone's largest investment theme in industrial real estate, and this is mostly distribution warehouse assets. But we are a infill last mile landlord, owning over 3,500 real estate assets, totaling over 500 million square feet. So we're a massive organization, and we're in the same asset class as Prologis, who's our competitor and a brand name in the space.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
So what do we need to understand about the demand side and how that's changing the market dynamics for you in real estate?
Yeah, it's fast. It's such a wonderful time to be in energy because it is so dynamic right now. It's changing, and even my role recently has changed. Where I was formerly leading our energy and sustainability business, and just recently I've splintered off to start our power and infrastructure business. And the reason for that is because we believe that we need dedicated resources to meet the growing customer demand for power. And this is both on the demand side and actually on the utility side. And so really just last month, we stood up a new business to ensure that we are driving value by working directly with utilities to see if we can build incremental power capacity across a lot of our assets.
So you're responding in real time. I think that we've talked about how quickly things are moving and the need for adaptive leadership to respond to this. But I think when you say that just in the last few months, I think it underscores the speed. I mean, this is sort of really, really rapid. Give me a little bit more meat on the bone for that. So what do you mean? And what are the market, what market conditions prompted you to say, we're going to create a whole new division just 3 months ago?
So to ground us, the industrial real estate market has about 19 billion square feet of product in this country. And traditionally, this is an asset class that has been very low energy density. And so we build to maybe 2 watts per square foot, right? But when you combine that with the fact that this is an 18 billion square foot monster, then the actual impact on energy demand, it becomes massive, especially like relative to data center land, where it's, I think the total data center stock is like 280 million square feet. So we're at 2 watts per square foot today. Right now, we're projecting that based on themes around electrification, automation, that we can ratchet up to 10, sometimes even 15 watts per square foot. So we're talking about step changes in our customer power demand profile. And working with utilities to ask for additional power used to be a lot easier, and now all of a sudden it's becoming very challenging. And so we see this both as an opportunity to drive lease income, drive rates, but also to ensure that we're preventing obsolescence across our product.
And we're going to talk about the opportunities more in a moment, but this is really interesting because a lot of, and rightly so, understandably, a lot of the conversation today has been the entrance of hyperscalers onto the scene and AI, and a little bit on industrial reshoring. We started off the day talking about how these two forces are coming together to create this enormous demand. You're talking about another layer, which is kind of more in the traditional industrial space, but it also involves some of the technological advancements. When you say electrification and automation, why is that contributing so much to this? From 2 to 10 or 2 to 15, that's a big jump.
Yeah.
What is happening inside our industrial heartland?
Yeah, so let me give you 2 examples. We have one of our largest customers. You probably get your packages delivered by this customer. And if they want to lease a space and they want to retrofit that space with electric heat pumps, and they need a couple thousand extra amps of power service, right? Historically, we may not be able to provide that, right? And so if we have other customers that are saying, hey, we want to retrofit electrical infrastructure or add in mega chargers, 150, 350 kW mega chargers at these facilities, there's a chance we have to bring in a new utility service. And again, this used to be something that was very straightforward. Now it's becoming a lot less convoluted, And so that's really one of the main kind of paradigms that we're seeing. They're driving this expansion in power demand, and automation is really the other one. And automation, think like high-speed conveyor systems driven by motors. That's kind of what automation is. And what we're also seeing is an expansion on the floor plate. So like historically, we may have customers that have automation as a function of 10% of their floor plate, but now it's 20. And next year, they're expanding to 30 or 40 of their floor plate. And that has a huge impact on the power demand and the power profile of these customers. So when you combine these kind of mega themes in electrification, last mile delivery, automation, the result is an increase in customer power demand.
Yeah, it's in competing resources from different places. And we think about the efficiencies of this automation. We don't often think about it being another layer of demand on power. I think that's a little underappreciated.
Yeah, it's productivity. I mean, it's really just baseline economics, right? In order to drive last mile productivity for our customers, they require more throughput, and throughput is going to require more automation and therefore more power.
So you just mentioned opportunity. So what is the opportunity here? How are you thinking about that?
Great question. Well, the opportunity is twofold, really. One is trying to understand where we can work with utilities opportunistically to ensure that we are targeting large load center power opportunities. So we're doing what everyone is doing in the real estate space, which is trying to figure out if they have assets that could become data centers tomorrow. Where we think that we have a differentiated approach to this business thesis is we have a balance sheet to cover expensive power pursuit requests with utilities because it's getting a little bit more expensive to apply for power. And because a lot of our sites are existing, we own them now, we can actually wait out the timeline for power delivery. And so that when you apply for large amounts of power, 100 megawatts plus, which is transmission level power, that really results in a long timetable. And so we're prepared to wait that out.
And that long timetable aligns you more with the build out that's required around.
Precisely.
As opposed to, I need it yesterday, which I think is where some of the tensions are rising.
Oh, absolutely.
Some other areas who sort of maybe haven't been in that landlord position, perhaps.
Yeah. We're a little bit less opportunistic on the development part because, again, these are existing properties with existing customers. And so we're able to work directly with utilities in some of these tier 1 data center markets to say, are these potentially strong conversion candidates? And then, of course, we can work with our customers like the Amazons of the world to figure out if there is potential for an occupancy opportunity.
So we're sort of putting this under the area of energy management, it sounds like, in a way. Is that correct? If I call it that, am I thinking about it correctly? And what are you building in-house that enables you to do this?
Great question. So I would not call it energy management.
Okay, good.
And actually, energy procurement, when traditional sustainability folks think about energy procurement, you're thinking about VPPAs and that kind of stuff. Whereas in power, right, energy procurement is transmission, and capacity agreements, substation, like real large infrastructure procurement. And so I think on the customer side, we want to make sure that we are on the utility side, right? Whereas traditionally we've optimized for power consumption through a program that we built called Energy Solutions. It's demand side. So through that program, we've delivered, 260 million square feet of LED retrofits. We have a growing solar program where I believe we have a couple hundred megawatts of solar in place. So all of that is on the consumption side, right, on the house side of the meter. But now that we've made our footprint very efficient, right, now we need to go to the utility side. Right, and so that's really where we think about the split between traditional energy management, demand-side energy management, to utility and power and infrastructure, right? And so everything short of rolling out a load bank, right, to make sure that you actually have the capacity that you're rated for, in addition to looking at new transformer, new switch gears to provide additional power capacity at the properties. That's really where the focus is right now.
And so what do you see as a challenge and where are you seeing success?
The challenge really is understanding what groups at the utilities can support additional power, right? There's no blinking red button on ComEd's website that says, click here for a new utility request. And there's not a whole lot of understanding for these utilities for what group you need to go through to request different types of power, whether it's 2,000 amps of incremental power service or distribution level power, where you can plug into an existing substation up to 20 to 50 megawatts, and then big chunks of power required for load centers. And a lot of utilities, there are different groups that do that, different cost profiles, different timing, and so that's kind of what we're trying to figure out. And that's one of the main challenges in the industry is really understanding what the pathway to power and energization looks like across these different utility markets. We operate in 260 utility markets, 260. Yeah, and so there's a lot of knowledge to be gained here in trying to understand how different utilities are operating.
I think that's one of the reasons that we've heard throughout the conference that partnerships are key right now, because you're trying to figure that out. You're all trying to piece that together in real time. That's on a runaway train, really.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that has to move at that speed in order to deliver. So that is super challenging, but again, as you say, full of opportunity.
Yeah.
So what's your perspective on, when we're talking about power, on next-gen power infrastructure, like hydrogen, small nuclear, you know.
SMRs,
yes,
sure.
SMRs.
Yeah.
We hear a lot about them. Hydrogen seems to have taken a back seat. How are you thinking about the different asset classes?
Yeah, I love this question. I know there's been a lot of SMR talk this week, but I mean, SMRs are still pretty far away. You know, let's remember, I think there are 2 operating SMRs in the world today. One's in China and one's in Russia. So these are not exactly tomorrow commercialized solutions yet. Clearly, there's a major macro growing trend for nuclear support. I think even today or yesterday, the World Bank, I think, approved a new commission to look at nuclear development in developing countries. So it's kind of everywhere right now. And, you know, energy density is king or queen right now. And nukes are a clear pathway to provide dispatchable baseload power that is dense. You know, and so I think that signals clear support for nuclear technology. You know, I love that people are talking about it as like a tip of the spear thing, and like it's been around for a long time. Hydrogen, you know, I'm a believer in hydrogen. I always have been, even back in my JP Morgan days when we did both solid oxide fuel cell investment and the phosphoric acid technology fuel cells. Better as a fuel source, I think. So I think the applications for cargo and freight are extremely interesting. But for IPPs and power generating infrastructure, you know, depending on your method of reformation, it's not commercial. You know, it's probably 5x if you're still using natural gas for reformation, and maybe it's 20x if you're looking for green hydrogen. And so, you know, the economics, I think, are pointing very clearly to nukes, you know, whereas hydrogen is probably still a little bit further down the runway in terms of commercialization.
When you said the sheer amount of utilities that you work with in the different locations.
Oh, it feels like we work for them, by the way. So if you ever try to sign a contract with the utility, make no mistake.
We have some of them in the audience today, so that's why these events are so great, because we get to bring together all the stakeholders. But it seems like, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, because we're all on a learning journey here. Part of the challenge is there's no one size fits all. There's no one solution. We talked about this with insurance earlier. Regionally, there are challenges. Different states have challenges. How do you go about addressing the fact that you know, if you had a blueprint that you could just replicate, it would be so much easier. But are you on a case by case? Are there similar learnings from experiences that you can apply?
It's a great question. You know, and it is case by case. And you know, we run the gamut for, well, let's just take an example of when you actually want to apply for a load study to perform a power entitlement if you intend to build a data center somewhere. So you're going to go and apply for power, right? And so once you find the person or the group at the utility that does the large load request, distribution planning, what have you, the range of what they ask you for, it goes from, hey, send me an email with your ramp schedule and your total capacity requirements, all the way to very sophisticated, you know, technical application details with master plans, full development lifecycle costs, and of course, you know, a meaningful amount of capital commitments that comes along with those applications. And so there doesn't seem to be like a silver bullet in what utilities are asking for when you make a large load center request. What I will say is that the process is now emerging with some consistency, you know, where you can expect to, once you get through and submit your application, you can expect to be assigned a scoping engineer. You know, that engineer can give you a sense of the timeline, you know, and as you move through your load study, that's when you can have a line of sight to their pathway to power. That load study can range from 6 months to 3 years in some cases. And so that I think is where the most ambiguity exists. And I think it's really a function of how organized some of the utility counterparties are. Like PG&E, we've gone through a couple of cycles with PG&E, very organized for how they approach large load center power requests. And we have other utilities I shall not name, but are still finding their way and how they're managing these just enormous numbers of load requests that are coming through.
Yeah, and I imagine part of it is because they're getting hit from all sides as they try to figure this out, right? You're coming to them with this. We've heard throughout sessions that the sort of strain is coming from all directions.
Oh, yeah.
So it's very difficult, I think, to manage in real time for an industry that was not being, this was not happening just a few years ago. So the pace of change, I think, is probably behind that. What advice would you give energy decision makers, whether it's at utility, and if not, fill in the blank, who else should be involved in this process to better collaborate on this?
Yeah, another great question. For the real estate side, I would say engage your landlords like us early. It's very important for us to get a sense of what the future power demand looks like, and because then we can start to prepare for it. I will tell you 3 things that we have macro conviction in, right? Is that it's going to get harder to get power, it's going to cost more to get power, and it's going to take longer to get power. That much we have a lot of certainty around. And so the more that we can front run those conversations around accretive advances in customer power demand and therefore infrastructure within your real estate, the more that we can ensure that we're making the investments to support that kind of demand.
And it's funny because I imagine there are people sitting here saying, so much has changed in the last 2 years. I'm not sure what my power demands are going to be. What kind of time frame are you trying to, how far out should they be looking when they're trying to quantify what their energy demands are? And do you have any, you're gathering all this data from many different kind of clients. Do you have an idea of what might be necessary in the future in terms of feedback? Does it go 2 ways?
I wish I had a better answer for this. I don't know. I think it depends on, it depends. Yeah. It depends on your asset strategy. It depends on, your lease versus own, real estate strategy. We're at Blackstone and Link, we tend to be pretty opportunistic in terms of our fund strategy. And so our asset life is somewhere in that 5 to 10 year horizon for when we seek to round trip capital back to our LPs. And so for that reason, we tend to think on a kind of a near term basis for how much power capacity we would need to support customer demand. That's changing though, right? Because in order to transact on real estate, we need to ensure that the next buyer has the infrastructure they need to ensure that cash flows continue through the useful life of the asset. And so it's beginning to shift even how we think about power and infrastructure, but I think
I want to just make sure
5 years is probably the
I want to just make sure that's a really, really important point. You were trying to look into the future beyond your current tenant, say, or whoever's occupying that space, to what the next.
Well, yeah.
In order to build out demand for that.
Well, yeah. It's funny. Energy assets and real assets are very similar, and how the business modeling functions. It's all about top line, right? It's all about your ability to drive revenue and then escalate revenue over time. And so if we're depending on selling cash flows to a future buyer, which is what we're depending on, then we need to ensure that we are preventing any kind of obsolescence related to power, power demand, power consumption, and of course power infrastructure and supply. So it's becoming much more important.
We sort of touched on this. Oh, let's even better. Let's get one of the questions from the audience. I think we have time. Yeah. Are you working on integrating on-site generation and storage solutions into the overall strategy at your facilities? Great question.
Yeah. Short answer is yes, absolutely. And we have a growing solar program and a partnership with Reactivate, which is a subsidiary of Invenergy, and just scaling it right now. So, but I would say that doesn't necessarily touch the demand equation, right? So we're still kind of in net metering land when we think about on-site generation. So within the, we have to stay within the limitation of existing power capacity. So it doesn't really support, advancing or, increases in customer power demand. We have done some stuff like that, more so in my previous life at JP Morgan. But then utilities, again, are getting smarter, where if you build behind the meter more capacity than you consume, then the utility is going to charge you a standby tariff, right? Which is their resiliency measure to ensure that if your system has a catastrophic fault and goes down and you pull in power from the grid, that you don't actually stress the grid. And so that washes out a lot of the economics sometimes for some of these large behind-the-meter power generating assets. Longer answer than you were probably hoping for.
No, I think that the amount of detail that we hope to get from that answer. Sam, thank you so much. I feel like this is such an important area. It's sort of new. You're on the front line of trying to figure this out. And even for the questions that we don't know the answers to, sometimes the smart questions we should be asking is where we need to go. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here.